Let's talk about classified documents cases where it's proven that the documents are fake and planted. I'm going to focus on Jeremy Brown. He is a retired U.S. Special Forces Green Beret, retired from the U.S. Army, and he went on to join the Oath Keepers in Florida, which prior to January 6th were known just as a club for retired military and police who would do private security for others. Given their name, Oath Keepers, they swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. After January 6th, they were labeled anti-government and far right. They're actually pro-government under the Constitution. Anyway, Jeremy Brown was recruited by the FBI in December of 2020 to spy on other Oath Keepers and other so-called far-right people, and perhaps catch them in a way, catch them up in something. That's kind of how they were trying to recruit him. Well, he turned down their recruit, but he recorded the conversation. After he released the conversation with the FBI about how they were trying to infiltrate and spy on right-wing groups, that is when the FBI came after Jeremy Brown. They raided his home, and he claims that they planted grenades and classified documents. Well, he went to trial in December of this past year, and the jury agreed that documents placed on his property in the raid did appear to be planted. They did not convict him on that one classified document, which was a CD. Now, they did convict him on another document, a trip report he had written while in the military, even though he says it was just the notes for the full trip report. It was not the actual classified document. Anyway, I sat down for an interview with Jeremy today. He is convicted of crimes that he says, were made up by the FBI as retribution for him shining light on the fact that they do recruit and infiltrate right-wing groups, and that they had been working on that even before January 6th, planning ahead in order to take people down in January. Before I show you the full uncensored interview with Jeremy Brown from jail, shout out to the sponsor of my coverage. The signs of future financial trouble for American investors and savers are piling on in 2023. Bloomberg is warning of a severe economic reset, and gold appears as a caged bull awaiting a catalyst. In May, JP Morgan senior team said, cut stocks, buy gold, and hold your cash. CEO of a major real estate investing firm declared it's really the perfect storm. Empty office buildings across the U.S. could lead to financial meltdown. Wells Fargo said gold is in a super cycle that could last another 6 years, and worst case scenario is $3,000 gold. The time for gold is here, and it is soaring. Let National Gold Group show you options for investing in precious metals like gold and silver in your retirement account and for direct delivery. Mention my channel and you'll always get best-in-class service for real American service providers. The National Gold Group IRA fee waiver program allows you to invest your IRA or 401k in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for their lifetime fee waiver on qualifying rollovers. You can call them at 888-617-5927. That number is down in my description, as well as a link to get your free investor guide today. National Gold Group is a Consumer Affairs top-rated gold IRA dealer. Call 888-617-5927. That's 888-617-5927, and add the power of gold to your portfolio. Of course, there's always a risk of loss with any investment. All right, let's look at this interview that I had today with Jeremy Brown, who seems to be focused, determined, and in great spirits despite a 7-year sentence.
An incarcerated individual at Citrus County, Florida. This call is not private. It will be recorded and may be monitored. If you believe this should be a private call, please hang up and follow facility instructions to register this number as a private number.
To accept this free call, press 1. To refuse this free call, press 2. If you would like to permanently block your number from receiving calls from this, thank you for using Securus. You may start the conversation now.
Hello?
Hi, is this Jeremy?
This is Ivory?
Yes, it is. Good to talk to you.
Good talking to you again, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, so I see you were sentenced to more than 7 years in prison.
That's right, for just one of the 31 counts that the president is facing.
Wow. You're talking about the classified documents, right?
That's right. He's facing the exact same charge that I was convicted on, which is Title 18, Section 793 ECHO, part of the Espionage Act.
Wow. I was going to ask you about President Trump's case, because last August, when Mar-a-Lago was raided, Eric Trump said that the FBI demanded that everyone leave and they turn off the surveillance cameras. But the lawyer refused. Still, they weren't allowed to come close. And they apparently the security cameras were left on, but Trump says he feels that evidence was planted. I know you feel evidence was, you've said evidence was planted at your home as well. So do you think, is FBI able to plant evidence when the cameras are on?
Well, I don't know. The planting of things surreptitiously can be done by numerous capabilities within the federal government, right? So in my case, I don't believe that it was actually on scene. I think there could be, but again, this is part of the cover story of a compartmentalized operation, is to direct everybody into the how, right? Really the how isn't the important thing. And so in my case, not only am I definitely 100% sure that things are planted, but the jury themselves refused to convict me on 4 counts of classified materials because the evidence that the government was providing, there was no evidence of it. They were simply claiming a classified CD-ROM was on the scene, but yet they had no logs of such of a CD-ROM. They had no photographs of a CD-ROM, and they tried to basically wordsmith it into the equation. And so the jury was like, there's no way we can convict them on these charges, and that's why I was only convicted on 6 of 10 counts. The charge that they did get to pass, I actually dared the government to charge me with that because I know it's not classified because I actually wrote the document myself. So I knew the exact nature of it, and unfortunately my attorney wasn't able to make that argument convincingly enough. But there's a lot of similarities between what is happening to former President Trump in my case. You mentioned one already, which is the security cameras. And they're going to claim, just like they did in my case, that, oh, this is just standard procedure to protect our tactics, techniques, and procedures while conducting a raid. But we're talking about a facility that had sea surface protection, right? So there's no reason. They're raiding Mar-a-Lago, which is an elite a multi-millionaire type resort, right? So the tactics, techniques, and procedures that would be revealed for raiding multi-million-dollar resort properties, probably not widely dispersed, right? That logic might wash with an average American home and say, yeah, this is the way we do certain things, right? So the reality is they don't want anyone seeing what they're doing, right? And so what we know they did is they staged photographs, they leaked photographs, right? So this is a similarity. The staged photos, in my case, was a similarity. The planted evidence claims, like I said, the jury agreed with our claim that the CD-ROM was planted. They didn't agree with the grenades, but that's for a different reason. The unnecessary SWAT-style raids. What people should do is look at the search warrant for the Mar-a-Lago raid, because just like in our appeal, the search warrant was completely illegal and deficient, right? And this is covered by Supreme Court ruling Grove versus Romero. Anyone who can get access to the Trump Mar-a-Lago raid search warrant should look at the search warrant and ensure that the same mistakes that the FBI made in my search warrant weren't possibly made there. Because see, if that search warrant is deficient, then that makes the entire raid go away and it drops the entire case. It's dispositive, right? And then there's the massive length of time between the raid and then the indictment. Exactly the same situation in my case. They arrested me on September 30th, but the indictment for classified materials didn't come until April of the following year, right? And then the actual document that they convicted me on That didn't even come until after my original trial date. November 8th is when they filed that indictment. They were attempting to prevent that document from being exposed because of what they thought the document was, but they didn't actually know. So they attempted to cover that up. And then you have the leaking of investigative discovery with intent. See, the bottom line is if they want to destroy you, they leak investigative information. So they leak photographs, they leak all of this rumor mill bull crap, right? But see, if they don't want to destroy you and they want to cover up their crimes, your crimes, and protect you, well, then there's no leaks. So look at the special counsel investigation into the Biden crime family, right? There's nothing coming out of that. Look at the Durham investigation. Nothing was leaked out of that, but there were leaks out of the Mueller investigation, right? So these are all the same thing. So the last similarity that I think we should look at is the fact that I ran for office from a jail cell. And so I think President Trump, former President Trump, should probably prepare for that same likelihood. And if he wants to contact my campaign commander for my election, then he's certainly welcome.
Wow. Well, I want to go back to the dropped charges you talked about, because just letting the audience know, I'm showing NBC Tampa's coverage. They said a federal jury convicted Brown on Monday of 5 felonies and 1 misdemeanor involving 2 illegal guns and 2 grenades and possession of classified documents. Each felony carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. The jury acquitted Brown of 4 other counts. Brown's sentencing is scheduled for March, which you ended up getting sentenced in April. But so this is from the trial in December. So again, NBC also reporting those 4 counts were dropped. Basically, FBI planting of evidence was clear to the jury too.
That's right.
And what exactly was this evidence? Well, really quick, let me just show. The Department of Justice put out a release on this as well. Tampa man sentenced to prison for unlawful possession of guns, grenades, and classified information. It says inside a briefcase next to the shotgun, agents found a classified trip report that Brown had authored shortly before he retired from the U.S. Special Forces. Inside the bedroom of that same RV, agents found an ammunition vest containing 2 M67 fragmentation grenades hidden in the pockets. U.S. Army records confirmed the grenades had originally been in the possession of the U.S. Army. I think you have said that those grenades were planted as well.
That's correct. And all the evidence or lack thereof points to that same occurrence. And so, but the reason the jury couldn't cross that bridge is because at the very last moment, in fact, as part of the government's rebuttal case, for those that know what we're talking about, let me, please bear with me as I explain it to those who don't know. A rebuttal case is the equivalent of the government batting first and batting last, right? So they have their case in chief, then you have the ability to make your statement and run your case. But then if the government can manufacture something that they heard during your defense, they get an opportunity to go ahead and present more evidence of which you do not get to respond to, right? And they don't have to expose this rebuttal case, of which they will have likely prepared for in advance. So in other words, they have to provide a witness list and they have to provide an evidence list for their case in chief. They do not have to provide any of this information for their rebuttal case, because see, the rebuttal case by definition is supposed to be a spur of the moment case that, oh, they heard you say something that they didn't know about, and so now they're rebutting that, right? And so in their rebuttal case on the grenades, they totally take an incomplete and out of context jail call, and then they claim that my reaction to my girlfriend running through the list before the call gets connected, my silence in hearing the word grenades was an admission of guilt, right? It was completely ridiculous and ludicrous. However, it must have had some type of effect, because that is the only piece of evidence that during deliberation that the jury asked to rehear. Now, after the fact, after the case is over, we were able to expose that phone call was continued. And when I received the actual full description of these grenades, because see, I own grenades. I own smoke grenades. I own airsoft grenades. I own grenades. So when my girlfriend said the word grenades, of course I'm not going to react to that. I know what I own because I'm a special forces operator. I'm aware of the status of my equipment at all times. But when she described them as live grenades that needed to be detonated, I gave an appropriate response. And so we've actually released that call on our podcast. But see, this is how the government operates. They twist everything. And there's other instances that as this goes on, we have an appeal in. So I try to incrementally release things that I hope will affect the appeal. But the reality is this is the way the government operates. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they tell you they're going to call witnesses. Like there was a jailhouse snitch that they said that they were going to call in my case. It's completely ridiculous because we have the jail call of this jailhouse snitch conspiring with his mother to lie in order to reduce his sentence, right? Like, their lies aren't even good. They're easily refuted, and yet you're never given that opportunity to do it the way that they have the rules of the federal criminal procedure set up. It's all meant to allow them to manipulate evidence, to manipulate the jury, and to get false convictions. And this is why they have such a high conviction rate, but they also have a very high overturn rate in appeals. So this is what the president's going to be facing, because it's exactly what I've faced.
So in this release from the Justice Department about your sentencing, it doesn't look like they mention that CD that was apparently planted. The jury decided it was planted. They do mention your trip report, which you say isn't even classified. Why isn't it?
Well, it's not classified because that what they are claiming is a trip report is actually my format for the trip report that was typed up separately inside a stiff that contained the actual classified material. See, in the preparing of classified documents, there are a lot of formatting issues, right? And so it's not like you just get on there and start typing out a text message with uncapitalized words and emojis and things like that, right? There's very strict formatting protocols that must go into any actually classified document. And so that document that they have was merely my preparation of that format in advance because I was in transit and didn't have access to a secure laptop or a secure facility. So the least I could do was utilize my time wisely and prepare the format so that when I got back, I could quickly pump this trip report out and get it to my command. That is what they recovered. And inside that document, I designed and implanted what we call internal authenticators that to anyone who knows should have identified them. And even in the testimony of their experts, one, they admit that they never compared the document that they found against actual classified material. They state it only appeared to be classified. And then one of their investigators even said that the document didn't look right to him for some reason. He just couldn't put his finger on it. So we just got the 1 minute warning, Irene. If you'd like, I can certainly call back.
Okay, yeah, give me a call back.
Okay.
All right, bye. Okay.
All right, Irene, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, I wanted to ask, what do you think, what did you do that made the Department of Justice come after you like this?
Well, it's my belief that the reason they came after me is because in December of 2020, December 9th to be exact, two agents from the Department of Homeland Security working on behalf of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force met with me face-to-face in Ybor City, Florida, and attempted to recruit me to report on groups that I may be associated with. The only two groups that I was associated with at that time was the Special Forces Association in Tampa and the Oath Keepers from Florida. And so, of course, you know, hindsight is 2020. We now know exactly why they were recruiting, because that recruitment meeting, right? And it was a soft pitch, right? It wasn't a hardcore, hey, here's a stack of cash or anything. This was in human intelligence, right? Once you spot and assess an individual and you move into the recruitment phase, you don't come at them hard. You gauge their interest in whether or not they might be able be willing to work with you. And so that is what they did. And I recorded that entire meeting. So you can hear it for yourself along with my assessment. And the exposure of that meeting, even then, wasn't enough to get them to come after me. It wasn't until Darren Beatty's article in early June of 2021, which began to tie and connect the dots between January 6th and the Michigan governor kidnapping plot, where the FBI had more agents than they actually had targets, right? And there were allegations of evidence planting and set up in that case. And then the exact same chain of command for that case was also heavily involved in January 6th. That national revelation by Revolver.News and Darren Beatty is what put me back on the FBI's radar. Because, see, that recruitment meeting took place 10 days before January 6th was ever even announced by the tweet from President Trump. And yet in that meeting, they mentioned, hey, if anything were to happen in January, right? So who was thinking anything would happen in January at that point in time? And now, of course, after the fact, we now know it. And not only that, but I was with all of those individuals that have been charged and convicted of seditious conspiracy. I was part of Kelly Meggs' security detail. Kenny Harrelson, Jessica Watkins, these Caleb Berry, all of these individuals were in the security detail that I was in. And yet when they were all arrested early on, right out of the gate in January, February, and March, there was no interest in Jeremy Brown. And the reason is because they know that they attempted to recruit me in December. So what they tried to do is ignore me into oblivion. But it was the revelations of, one, my release of this recording, which not many people paid attention to. I think just under 2 million people listened to that 2-hour interview of me going through the recording. It wasn't until the national spotlight got shined on it by Darren Beatty that is when, according to all of the investigative product that was provided me in discovery, that is when manufacture an investigation into me, and then of course came and arrested me 10 months after the fact on misdemeanor trespassing arrest warrant, but came with a magical search warrant under the jurisdiction of domestic terrorism, and then found explosives and classified materials for which they put me on trial for, and yet the entire time claimed, oh, this case has nothing to do with January 6th. Until after the conviction, and then in the sentencing memorandum, it magically became all about January 6th. And the day before that trial, they filed a motion to exclude the recording between me and those two agents, claiming it wasn't relative to this simple search warrant case, of which the judge agreed and said, well, we'll see if January 6th even comes up at trial. Now, I ran 51 episodes of a daily podcast prior to trial talking about how I didn't care if I went to jail, that the purpose of going to trial was to expose this involvement in January 6th. And somehow, magically, my defense attorney refused to bring up January 6th or the recording at trial, despite it being the entire motive for my defense, which was that I was retaliated against because I was blowing the whistle and because I was pointing out the fact that there was federal government involvement in January 6th, and that this recording was evidence of that. Never came up at trial. But what it did do is it did lock the government into another lie. See, they went through the entire trial and never claimed that it had anything to do with January 6th. So this is the problem with lies. Once you say them, you're kind of locked into them.
Wow. So you're appealing this. I'm assuming you're going to get a new attorney then.
Yeah, so that attorney is long gone. He ran away from that case as quickly as he could. But
Wow.
we do have now. I still have 2 misdemeanor counts in D.C. that we're going to force to trial, even though if convicted and given the max, I'm already at time served. So a sane, logical person would say, all right, well, why don't I just plead to these misdemeanors and go about my way to my final prison destination and start ticking this time off so I can be a free man? But that is not my goal. And I've said all along, I will spend the rest of my life in jail if that's what I have to do in order to expose what is being done to the American people. And that is why I'm taking these 2 counts of misdemeanor all the way to trial in D.C. at great expense, because I will get another bite at the ability to stand on a stand and enter into the official transcript, into the official record, the truth about January 6th from my perspective and based on my experience of 20 years in special operations with a background in covert, clandestine, and compartmentalized operations.
So you plan to show those recordings with the FBI during that trial?
That is absolutely correct, as well as, Paul, an extensive list of witnesses that will totally destroy the government's false narrative. I think most Americans don't even know that the reason President Trump said we're going to march to the Capitol is because there was actually planned and approved, permitted First Amendment rally scheduled for the Capitol. There were supposed to be stages constructed on Capitol grounds, the very Capitol grounds that the Department of Justice is claiming, oh, just by being there, you're trespassing. Well, if there's a permit for a rally on Capitol grounds, then how could all those people possibly have trespassed? But see, this is it. This is an indication of the setup. See, they approved these permits so that the individuals taking part in this rally think, oh, we're just going to a rally. And yet, on the backside, they censor and hide these permits and claim that there was some kind of invisible, mythical boundary that everyone crossed, and now they all need to be round up by the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. And even though we have on video suspicious actors removing barricades, removing signs, removing fencing prior to everyone getting there, and none of these individuals have been arrested, we're told, oh no, this was just a takeover of the American government by 20 unarmed guys who left weapons in another state because they violated Washington, D.C. gun laws. Now, see, if you believe that, well, then you are going to get the government you deserve, because you're clearly not smart enough to counter what has happened to you. And that is that you're being completely lied to in order to divide this country so that they can run us into the ground.
So NBC Tampa is reporting that you'll be tried in D.C. at a later date for trespassing on Capitol grounds January 6th, and you are not accused of entering the Capitol. You were hired, you said, as a private security for some of the speakers at that rally, right?
Well, we weren't hired. The Oath Keepers had volunteered to provide security for organizers and speakers at the event. And so once January 6th was announced by the president, I reached out to the Oath Keepers here in Florida and said, hey, do you need additional bodies for this security detail? And they said, sure. And so I was basically assisting them as a volunteer to provide this type of security wherever we were needed, basically, right? Because there was a history and a pattern of counter protest at all of these Trump rallies, and that was their entire purpose. And for the government to then convert that into some type of plan to have an unarmed overthrow of the United States government, it's embarrassingly ridiculous, their entire narrative.
Yeah, I was looking at one mainstream media report that was talking about Channel 10 Tampa Bay, talking about who the Oath Keepers are as an anti-government group.
That's right. An organization that It's made up of military and law enforcement, a lot of former law enforcement and military, whose name is Oath Keepers, meaning referring to the oath to support and defend the Constitution. Yes, this is what we're meant to believe. We're supposed to believe that this organization is anti-government. No, we are non-constitutional government, right? Like, I'm anti-communist, I'm anti-socialist, I'm anti-Marxist. And so I'm anti-democracy because we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, right? And our founders believed that democracy was one of the worst forms of government possible because it's mob rule, right? And so this narrative of far right-wing militia and anti-government, this and that, is, again, just like the narrative for January 6th, completely absurd. But they rely on the ignorance of the American people. They rely on the fact that people just watch the news and believe everything that they're told, and so therefore they can control the narrative through their information dominance.
Wow. So you're facing 7 years in prison. I mean, you've been jailed since 2021. Is this an additional 7 years, or is that time included?
Well, it should be included, but that's again, it's not really something that I've spent a whole lot of time looking into, because one, I'm less concerned about the time. And something I want to point out to everybody: that 7.25 years, the 87 months, all of that is tied to that single document. Because the way that federal sentencing works, you get all these points, right? Well, the weapons charges were only 18 points. The document alone was 29 points. So all of that 7.25 years is pretty much tied to that single document. So this is the value of these classified materials charges that were brought against me, as well as are going to be brought against, or have been brought against, the former president of the United States, right? Because it's a narrative that is hard to overcome the psyche of the American people, right? When you hear them say, oh, well, we have classified documents and he was going to endanger national security. In court, they literally tried to describe me as putting the lives of American service members at danger, the lives of our allies at danger. The very administration who overnight abandoned Afghanistan that led to 13 or more service members. Those are just the ones that we know about from that one suicide bombing, right? Lives of American service members that this administration actually took, right? Hundreds, if not thousands, of Afghans that have been hunted down by the Taliban are all as a result of this administration's actions. The special forces operators that attempted to go in despite the U.S. State Department trying to prevent it at every level, to put up every roadblock from these brave men and women that were trying to go in and rescue Americans. That administration stood in a federal courtroom and accused me of their crimes. And that is the point of the classified documents. And they will do the same thing to the former president.
Okay, we're almost out of time. What's your final message to the viewers, how this applies to them?
Well, my final message to everyone is this is a coordinated assault against American sovereignty being conducted by an overly compromised federal government. And if you don't do something quick, they'll be coming for you as well.
If you want to learn more on Jeremy Brown, he actually has his website, jeremybrown.defense.com. You see, you can schedule an interview with him, donate to his Give, Send, Go. This shows the video and audio of his recording of the FBI as they were trying to recruit him. So I've linked Jeremy's website down in my description, jeremybrown.defense.com.